Welcome back to the Hub Scale podcast, where we dive into the minds of security leaders all around the world. So this week we have a very special guest, which is Mike McGrath. He's a sales leader over at Cribl. So Cribl is labeled a data engine for IT and security, and it's one of the fastest growing companies, going from 1 million to 100 million in less than 4 years. Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on, Mike.
Hey, James, thanks for having me.
No problem at all. So for the listeners that don't really know who you are, would you like to give a brief introduction to yourself?
Yeah, sure. Mike McGrath. I've been in software sales now. It's coming up on 27, 28 years. I started in the late 90s. Actually, my first gig was in inside sales, and quickly moved to the field. And now I lead a sales team over here at Cribl.
Nice. So yeah, for the podcast today, obviously we want to cover off a couple of different topics. However, to start, I think it would be good to give you an opportunity to introduce Cribl to the listeners who don't really know what you guys do.
Yeah, sure. So as you mentioned, we've switched kind of the how we describe ourselves. We call ourselves the data engine for IT and security. And I'll talk a little bit about what that means. When I first started several years ago, we talked strictly about data pipelines, right? Essentially moving data from source to destination. Now we've really expanded with a broader set of tools, really helping organizations get value from their IT and security data. And the market, the dynamics have shifted, where we were focused on a set of buyers, if you will, and it's really expanded out significantly, not just in security, but to the observability side of the house, with offerings like Edge and Search. And we're about to announce another product in the next 2 weeks. Also, we believe will be a bit of a game changer from how we help organizations get value from their data.
Nice. No, really exciting times are going on over at Cribl, and I'll definitely make sure to look out in 2 weeks when that new product gets launched. But like I said, it's great to have you on, Mike. So the first topic we kind of want to go over, like I said, you have an extensive experience within kind of sales, with I think it's about 18 years of those being in management. So first one I want to cover is more like sales excellence. So as a manager, what do you believe are the kind of fundamental pillars for a seller to be successful?
Yeah, it's a great question. When I first started, I would tell you that I had a misconception, which I think, frankly, a lot of people do around sales. And I don't want to disparage any particular industry, but often, you hear analogies to car sales, right? Like, and the proverbial, how do I get you in this car today? When I first started, I thought that was a bit of what sales was. And I realized very, very quickly, sales was significantly more about listening than it was about talking and pitching and so forth. And it was fundamentally about understanding a customer's challenge, a customer's, what we say today, you hear a lot of what's their pain, right? What's the challenge that they're going through? So the first kind of fundamental aspect is just great listening skills, listening and there's all kinds of ways to describe it. Hey, you have one mouth and two ears, and all kinds of different ways to try to get that message across. And you see it in meetings when a customer with just a few questions, you begin to understand. And the moment you can see sometimes a shift in particularly younger or less experienced reps, where they want to jump in and they want to say something. And we're constantly coaching to let that person talk, let them say what they want to say. Whatever they have to say is probably significantly more interesting than whatever we think we might have to say around some widget, some feature within our product set. It's like, let's understand where they're coming from. So that's kind of fundamental, and that's what we look for. There's a whole set of attributes that we look for when we're interviewing folks. We use this acronym called ICE, right? Intelligence, character, coachability, and experience, probably in that order. It's important to be smart. It's important to have great communication skills and to think through problem sets and how to work through a problem. The character thing is interesting. We have, hopefully I can say this on this podcast, we have a bit of a no a-hole policy, right? Where it's really important that we use this phrase, stay hungry, stay humble. And that's really, really important, because that helps define our sales culture and how we go to market and how we how we invest in our customers' success takes a particular type of individual, and it really sets the framework for our sales culture, which, I've done this for a long time, and I can say that we have an excellent sales culture.
Yeah.
And then the next one, coachability. Coachability is, for me, probably the biggest. I think of analogies of, folks that understand this business. It's a high stakes, high reward type business. You can really earn kind of crazy income potential. And so I always use analogies of sports professionals. The best sports professionals have coaches. LeBron James, Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, all of these, Tom Brady, all of them have coaches, and all of them learn and are humbled to learn from their coaches. I would say the same thing for when we're looking at candidates. We try to find that coachable person. To myself, I would say, gosh, there's so much that I still have yet to learn, and I've done this a long time. And I feel like that mindset coming into the business every day just helps you grow and prosper, because you're always open to the potential to learn and grow and develop. And then the last one is experience, which honestly is it's good, it's helpful, it's good to have the language, it's good to have an understanding of the process and the mechanics of the business, but it's not the most important. It's good to have an element of it, but I'd take the less experienced, super coachable, very humble rep over the I've seen and done it all, and I'll walk you through kind of how this thing works. Not a healthy dynamic when you're trying to scale fast and grow, and you're going to run into things that are going to be challenges. So those are the key things that we look for when we're trying to find the best of the best.
Perfect. No, I completely agree, especially with the no a-hole philosophy. That's one of my favorite ones. But in terms of, obviously, that's the kind of individual contributor side. But for any managers that might be listening today, what would you say are the main tips in kind of teaching like a world-class go-to-market team?
Yeah, that's a great one too. It's really, really important that over and above all things, I think you have to lean into process, right? We talk about the 3 R's of leadership. So recruiting, retention, and revenue. Have a process to recruit. I get on a lot of interviews, and reps are, and even leaders are, sort of blown away by the questions that we ask. And I attribute that to just learning. There's a bunch of books out there. There's one in particular that has kind of changed how I recruit, and it's going through a whole series of questions. Every single time it's the same questions, really trying to get at who is this person that I'm hiring. Have a process, right? And lead into that process, not just for recruiting, but how you run your business, whether that's, weekly one-on-ones. Have a process for your one-on-ones. How you look at things like leading indicators. How is the rep doing against leading indicators? Lean in on that process, because that process will help you scale and help you develop both your talent. So that's the retention part of it. Like, how can I help this person get to become the best possible individual contributor that they can be? By the way, then when you do those things and you have that process and you rely on that, the revenue will come. It's like it naturally flows from relying on those processes to help you develop the team, develop as leaders, and to help scale the business.
Perfect. No, I love that. I feel like one of the topics you keep on touching upon kind of leans into our next conversation is more the kind of recruitment side of things. And obviously, like I mentioned before, Cribl's gone through a massive kind of growth phase. And so when you started, I believe it was in 2022 compared to 2024 now. So how have you found the kind of dynamic shift from hiring in that year compared to hiring for Cribl in 2024?
Yeah. So I started in 2021, and we were a Series B. And it was actually, it's quite challenging, right? Because we were coming out of COVID. Frankly, a lot of you can look at you can look at so many different resumes, and you can see this sort of dip in performance, and you'll hear, oh, COVID, couldn't get in touch with people, everything changed, and so coming out of that, it was really, really tough to find people that were willing to jump into a Series B. Like, think at the time we were maybe $5 million in revenue, and people were like, Cribl, what is this thing? Never heard of it. And then now you not only are you trying to get the word out, but you're also trying to scour the the pool of candidates for the best of the best and convince them that, everything's going to work out and it's going to be great. And so you really had to find, people that were willing to take that risk and lean in. And fortunately, we were able to do that across the board, and find really, really exceptional talent. It's quite different now, where the word is out, if you will. So now we've gone from 5 to 130 million in revenue in about 4 years, 3 years rather. The fourth fastest, infrastructure software company to achieve that. And so a lot of people know about Cribl, and we get a lot of inbound. So now the dynamic is you have to be almost more scrutinizing, right, for the right kind of rep. And why that's really important is it's this moment in time for us is all really around massive scale and constant change, right? And again, there's kind of a seat for everybody at the right point in their journey. But if you're looking for, hey, I just want my 8-10 accounts and I don't want that to change, probably not a good place for you to be right now, because we're scaling, we're growing, we're going to continue to grow. We just went through a whole segmentation process, going from sort of a leader having an entire market to now strategizing around segmentation around strategic enterprise and commercial accounts. Again, takes now you're starting to put people into different categories of sellers, and what's required around more farming skills than hunting, more partner-led business than direct, and so forth. So these elements we have to factor in as we continue to grow the business and find the right talent for this period of time.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I guess kind of going back to 2021 then, I'm guessing quite a few listeners would like to understand, what would be the kind of main characteristics that you looked out for, Mike, when hiring, like I say, for more of that startup where it's like one of the first people there?
Yeah. So one of the first things that we looked for is, have you been in a startup like us? Like, have you done it? Because now it sort of contradicts what I said earlier about experience. In that respect, that type of experience, it was really, really, really important, because it's about understanding the expectation going into the business, right? And it's funny, you might think this is a crazy thing for us to say. I remember the first day, I won't name the customer, but my first day on the job, I had a meeting with one of the guys on my team with a very large monster global investment bank, and we were just excited to take the meeting. It was a little bit of like, hey, why'd you take the meeting? We were super excited. That dynamic has obviously changed quite a bit. So that first rep had to have been in a startup, because they have to understand, that's not going to be the norm. It's going to be really, really hard to get a meeting as well as we were doing in terms of capturing key names. There were a bunch of names that we as a business were able to capture very early on, and that drew a lot of attention. A lot of that hiring, James, at that period of time was very, very much like you had to know the person, right? So it was a little bit of like, look, I know this guy, I know this gal, like we work together, or I vetted them through a whole series of conversations with other people. And that's another thing that we really, really lean on is our own networks, or our peers' networks. That's the best way to hire at that point, is you really have to know those people to bring them in, because it's about setting the expectation around what's going to happen and how choppy and how turbulent it will feel as someone coming into the business, where we're literally embarking on the beginning of the journey of just getting the word out. It's quite different now, right?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And like you say, obviously the dynamics definitely changed from when you first started to now. So I guess I always like to kind of ask this question to like hiring managers or people that one of my clients is, when you're in the interview and like when you're speaking to these reps, what would you be looking for? Like, what would be the main tips that you'd be looking for someone to come into an interview prepared for?
Yeah, great question. So I think the first thing that we were looking for, and this has shifted a little bit, the first thing we were looking for is familiarity with the market, whether that was the source of data or the destination. Like, do they know the buyers? Can they help us get in? Or, and again, that startup piece, have they worked in a startup, one of those startups, and they've grown with it, they've scaled up, they've experienced the change? The other piece is our go-to-market is partner first, right? So there was also an expectation and an understanding of familiarity with said partners that we were working with, that we continue to work with. It's always nice to say, oh yeah, I know so and so at these 2, 3, 4, 5 partners, and it'll be a warm conversation versus cold. It's not an absolute, but again, these are things that you look for, and it helps distinguish between somebody coming in purely cold and somebody coming in with some level of understanding. And then after that, kind of goes back to some of those things in the interview process. You can see it, by the way. There are some reps that will do an incredible amount of preparation, that will do a bunch of background checks, themselves. They will, when you get a rep that comes to a conversation and says, oh, hey, I spoke to so-and-so on your team, or I spoke to your peer, or I reached out to your boss, whatever it may be, man, that's the type of rep that really excites you, because if they approach the interview process like that, it's very likely, not absolute, but it's very likely they'll approach their pipeline generation processes in the same way. They will scour the world to go find a way into those conversations with customers. So we look for those things as well. And then, look, a track record, a history of success goes a very long way, showing that you've been able to produce time after time in a host of different companies and different selling environments, different solutions. That matters, right? That shows a sort of the kind of rep that has figured out a way to find out a way every time, right? Regardless of the scenario.
No, perfect. And then the kind of final topic, obviously, like you mentioned before, you've got an extensive career, being really successful in sales. So it'd be great just to talk about your kind of journey throughout there, kind of like you mentioned, starting off in the 90s to, leading the team at Cribl now. So talk to me about that. So how did you kind of find your way transitioning into kind of cybersecurity?
Yeah. So it's an interesting little journey. I won't bore the listeners with all of the details, but I went to a college where it was a unique program. It was a great books program. So instead of reading textbooks, you read the actual authors, and it was the style was seminar style or tutorial style. So everybody sat around a series of tables, and we read the works, and we asked great questions. And for me, that was a thing that really kind of honed me into what it would take to be really, really successful, is ask great questions. And I felt like every time I was early days, I was like, gosh, I'm using those skills of just listening, asking questions, learning, asking deeper questions, and so forth. And that skill really helped me early days become successful from the jump. How I got into it is a funny story. I was a teacher out of college, and one of my students' father was starting an inside sales group, and he was asking around, and somebody said, hey, who do you know that might be good in sales? And so, I know this guy, Mike McGrath, you should talk to him. Funny story, my first interview with the guy, I had the flu, but I wanted the job so badly that I met with him. And he said, like, gosh, this is like the worst interview I've ever had, but my daughter raves about you. I'm going to give you a shot. And I got a job in inside sales. And I will tell you, like, I rigged the system. I was in his office every day for that first job. Just, hey, tell me more. How would you handle this? How would you do this? And I just felt like I was the student and he was the teacher, and I took advantage of that. And that helped really shape, how I thought about how to be great at this job, is just to continue to ask great questions. I mean, there's tons of things I don't know. I get on sales calls. I don't assume anything. I come into it, and I try to encourage reps to go into calls. You can have a bit of a premise, but man, the instant you think you know the answer, just stop, check yourself, and check in with the customer on that. And that's really helped shape how I think about what it takes to be great. One of the dynamics that's changed for me as a leader, I had an opportunity to join a company called AppDynamics years ago, and I would say it really helped change my appreciation for sales leadership in a way that I hadn't before. And a shout out to a couple of those guys who did a phenomenal job. There's one guy in particular who, so Dolly Riach, who was the CRO at the time, he and one of his sales leaders, this guy Jeremy Duggan, who's a Brit. Dolly did a great job in investing in sales leaders, and every 6 months, sales leaders would have an offsite somewhere in the world, and Jeremy would come in, and for 2 or 3 days, he would teach the leaders how to lead. And it really fundamentally changed how I thought about leadership. The investment that those guys made in leaders made for me all the difference. Because in the past, while I had been successful as an individual contributor and as a leader, I didn't have the skills to teach other leaders, right? And it was through that process that really helped me grow as a leader and to be able to help other leaders lead, if you will. Were you going to ask a question there?
Yeah, I was just going to say, obviously, like you mentioned there, you're a top IC and then moving into management. I feel like with career paths, you always see someone sticking in there or trying it out in management. So in terms of the kind of main piece of advice, what would you give for someone who is kind of looking to transition into all that kind of player manager type position?
Oh, gosh, that's a great question. Go into it for the right reason, right? You know, there are I'll tell you a funny story real quick. I went in, there was a time in my career where I got a new manager, and I think the guy was frankly quite well intentioned, but didn't convey it. When we sat down, he kind of asked me, you know, what are the things that motivate you? And you know, I was a young guy, and it was sort of, oh, I don't know, you know, attribution, accolades. You know, I would like to get, you know, the notice for the hard work and the success and so forth. And you know, before I could finish, you know, my sentence, he turned around and told me, he's like, well, just, you know, one of the reasons I became a leader is for power and control. I really want to, you know, have that kind of handle on the business. And I thought to myself, whoa, wow. I was really shocked, you know. And I thought, gosh, I don't know that that's the right reason to go into leadership, right? So the advice I'd give to somebody is like, go into it for the right intention. Like I went into it and said, gosh, I've had a lot of success as an individual contributor, and I love that element of, you know, being front and center with the customer and so forth. But I thought, man, I think I can have a bigger impact on the business, and I really love that element of coaching and mentoring, genuinely. And like, I really want to help, you know, because I really want to help reps become better reps. I want to help leaders become better leaders, and I think if your heart's in the right place in terms of like having that big impact, if you go into it for the right reasons, you'll find more success versus the title and the supposed like income and so forth. Look, it's hard everywhere. So you know, you kind of have to choose your hard and make sure you choose it for the right reason. The second thing I'd say in terms of like the advice is make sure you surround yourself with really, really good people, good leaders, and be open and willing to learn from them at any and all times, right? Again, here I am, you know, sort of almost 30 years into it, and I feel like, gosh, I'm excited to work with new people and to learn from people, you know, who just approach things in a particular way, who are very thoughtful, who are genuine in their concern to in willingness to help. What a great opportunity to learn from those folks, even after all this time, right? And then I would just also say, like, be ready to go into it or come into it with, you know, you're going to have to learn a ton, and you'll be surprised by the things that you hadn't even thought of as a leader, and then you come into, and if you approach it the right way, you can absolutely have wild success. And I think fundamentally, this is, to me, is like makes all the differences. Like, this is a really hard gig, because of the sort of the constant demand, the constant pressure to deliver, but at the same time, it can be incredibly rewarding. So if you go into it with all of that in mind, I think you can have an incredibly rewarding career in leadership for sure.
Perfect. No, I absolutely love that, Mike. And yeah, I really appreciate the time today. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, and I'm sure a lot of like up and coming managers and top performing ICs will really gain a lot of knowledge and information from our discussion today. So the final question, which I wanted to finish with, if you could go back to 21-year-old Mike, what would that one piece of advice be that you'll give him?
Yeah, that's such a great question. Boy, I wish I could talk to 21-year-old Mike for a lot of reasons. But we'll just keep it simple. Look, I think, and again, this kind of goes back to my time at App Dynamics, is this was really reinforced. Really put yourself out there in terms of the network, right? And think about and I'm talking professionally, the possibility to be surrounded with really, really talented people, that's super, super important. And it's okay to be in some ways intimidated, for lack of a better term, of like, you really have to lean in, and it's okay that you're not at that level. It's okay that there are all these sort of, titans of industry and so forth around you. Like, that's how you're going to learn. That's how you're going to grow. That's how you're going to develop. And so surround yourself in that 21-year-old Mike, I would say, look, pick up the phone and get in front of people, get in front of as many people as you can to figure out where you should be, take their guidance, their advice, and ultimately find one or two people that you can really lean on to help mentor your early career, to help you grow and develop. There are people out there that are willing to do it. They love to do it. You constantly get people, that have gone through and say, hey, how can I help? Right? Yeah. Find one or two of those people, and be taken under their wing, and you'll love the ride. Absolutely.
Fantastic stuff. That's a great piece of advice there, Mike. But yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure to actually have a conversation with you today. So yeah, I look forward to seeing what you've got in store going over at Cribl. Seems to be a very exciting time. So yeah, definitely want to keep an eye on over the next coming years.
Yeah, James, thank you so much. It's first of all, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation, and hope people can glean a couple things from it. And yeah, like the next several years at Cribl are going to be absolutely phenomenal.
Fantastic stuff. Well, yeah, thank you very much, Mike, and I'll speak to you soon.
Yeah, take care, James.